So what did we do in the last lesson? Well, we did what's called a grouped data table. Grouped data table. And in a grouped data table, we generally have intervals. So we have intervals of numbers. That's why it's grouped. Then we have a frequency. So let's say, let's give an example of 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. So this is just an interval of numbers. We could have a count. Let's say our count is like that. What would the modal interval be? What would the modal interval be for this particular set of grouped data? Okay, so you guys are on it. You're on it. The modal interval is going to be between, oopsie daisy, 30 and 40. And the reason is that the biggest number in the frequency column is the 7. So modal interval is going to be between 30 and 40. What about the median interval? What is the median interval going to be for this grouped data table? And what do we need to do in order to work out the median interval for grouped data table? Okay, you can do cumulative frequency to help you. Absolutely, you can. I was thinking we need to know how many items there are in the data set, don't we? So what will my n be for this little example I've made up? What would n be? So there's 3 items in this interval. There's 5 in this interval. If I add these up, so 8 plus 6, 14, 21, 20, I get a total of 24, unless I'm going mad. 14 plus 7 is 21, 24 items in the data table. Now, oh, we please make sure we're on mute. There we go. Okay. So what we have is we need to now calculate the position of the median. So if we have n is 24, the position of the median is going to be a half times n plus 1. So what is the position of our median going to be? What is the position of our median? So it's going to be the 12.5th position. Now, which interval is going to contain the 12.5th position? Okay, so now, if we count to here, we've got 3. If we count to here is 8. And this is where sometimes it can be helpful to have what's called a cumulative frequency column, where we count up how far we've gone so far. So this is 3, then we've gone to 8. Now, we haven't got far enough to get to the median. So now I've got to 14. Have I gone far enough now? I mean, if I kept going, I'd get to 21 and then 24. I've gone way too far. So the magic seemed to happen when I got to this interval. And so the median interval is going to be between 20 and 30. All right, now, the measures of central tendency, or where the middle is, for a group data table, we have the modal interval, we have the median interval, And we also spoke about in the last lesson how to find the estimated mean. And what we did to find the estimated mean is we used our calculators. And so I would encourage you to look at the last half of the last lesson to do that. But basically what we did was we found the midpoints of the interval, and then we typed in the midpoints into our calculator, and we also typed in the frequency count, and the calculator helped us get an estimated mean. The reason we couldn't get a true mean is that we don't have exact values. We only have estimates of what's in the interval. I see some hands were up, so let me unmute some students to ask questions. Ayode, I think your hand is up. What is your question? Hey.
So, I wanted you to repeat the median part. I didn't really understand it.
Say it again. Which one?
How you got the median?
The median. Okay. So what I did was I looked at how many items. Are you happy that there are 24 items in this example that I gave you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we use a formula called the position formula for the median, which is a half times n plus 1. And that's not the median, it's simply the position. So I put 24 for my n. Are you okay with getting 12.5 position?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now the only thing we have to do is figure out which interval does this position fall into. So if I go into the first interval, I've only got 3 items in total, so I haven't got near 12. Then if I add 5 more, I've got up to 8. Can you see I'm still short of getting to the right position?
Yes, sir.
And now if I add 6 more, I've gone too far, which means that the median interval must be over here between 20 and 30.
Okay, sir, I get it now.
Perfect. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, sir.
All right, now, what is going to be new today? Today, we are going to talk about the graphs that go with grouped data. And the 2 graphs that we're going to talk about are the histogram, okay, and the frequency polygon. And they're very, very closely connected. And you will see this today. Here is an example of a histogram. A histogram has grouped data along the bottom, and then it has the frequency count of whatever you're dealing with. In this case, it's days of the year on the vertical axis. Can you answer this question for me? Which of the 4 options do you think is correct if you're reading off this thing called a histogram? Which of these 4 options do you think is correct? I suppose I want to know how many days was the 2 p.m. temperature above 70? So where is 70? 70 is here. So I'm actually focusing on these 2 blocks or these 2 intervals. And I think I need to try and see what number they go with on the axis. It looks to me like this blue one is a bit above 20, but below 30. So maybe like 28 or something, or around there. And this one over here, well, it's about like 11 or 12. I don't know. I can't see exactly. Which answer do you think will be correct for this one? Well, this is too small. That's too big. That's not even close. So the answer must be B. Okay, so approximately 39 days out of the year would be above 70 degrees, essentially. Now, I'm going to make up my own question now. How many days in the year are below, approximately how many days are below 40 degrees? So how many days are below 40 degrees for this particular data set? Approximately. Put your answer in the chat. So below 40 degrees, where is 40 degrees? 40 degrees is here. So below 40 can only be this interval here. So how many days is it below 40 degrees? Well, how high does this go? It goes above 60. If that's 70, this is about 64, 65, somewhere around there. We'll say it's 65, 64 days. So, and you can imagine that all of these frequencies, they have to total up to a whole year, which is 365. Yeah. Okay. So a histogram is not very difficult, but it's good to get some practice. But I think you're doing well so far. So let's do another one. So in this situation, they are measuring rainfall at the same spot in the garden for 365 days. It's recorded to the nearest millimeter. On approximately how many days was the rainfall less than 10 millimeters? So I'll let you think through that to try and answer that, and then I'll talk to you about, we'll take any questions.
Mr. S.
Yeah.
There's someone in the chat that asked, is there a way to figure out the frequency with group data when just given the intervals and cumulative frequency?
You can work backwards, yes, you can work backwards. So if you had, okay, this is a slightly separate question, but I'll kind of recreate the table here. So 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. Now, if you had the frequency column, if you didn't have it, oh, sorry, my whole computer just changed color. So what you're saying is if you had CF, so if you had like, that was 6, that was 14, that was 26, I'm making numbers up. In the first row, if your cumulative frequency is 6, that's going to be 6. And then in order to get from 6 to 14, that would have to be 8. And then to get from 14 to 26, this would have to be 12. So you would just work backwards. I assume that would answer the question. Okay, but that was a separate question. I'll leave it up for a second. Yeah. Okay, what answer do we think it is? Less than 10 would be here. So that's about 81 or 82. And then this one is about 135. And the only one that I can see that would get close to those two is going to be 216, which would be D. Let's see how many students agree with me. Ah, looks like we're good. Okay, now just another point is if you're given a histogram, you can recreate the data table that it came from quite easily. So all you would need to do, for example, here, the intervals, draw this. Can we see there's a mute there? Mute all. If we go from the intervals, so 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, those are the intervals. And if you wanted to recreate the frequency column, all you would need to do, let's say over here, we get 1, 30, was that about 135? That was about 81. This is about, let's say, approximately 70. This would be about 48. This would be about 25. And this would be about, yes, that would be about 5, 10, maybe let's say like 6. Bongo, see if you could just keep yourself on mute, please. Cool. Cool. Then I want to know if, give me a thumbs up if you can follow how I recreated this table. What was that? 25 to 30 would be about 10. How I recreated the table from this thing over here. Okay, fantastic. So all I was doing is I was looking at the intervals at the bottom, and then I was looking at the frequency counts, and I recreated this over here. Now, what we need to know about before kind of we get to the end of this first half is, what is a frequency polygon? And a frequency polygon is just going to be a graph where you connect the midpoints of each of the intervals to each other, and you add 2 extra bits on each side. So if I had to go for the next interval, if I had to add a next interval, what do you think the next interval after 25 to 30 is going to be? If I had to add one. Okay, 30 to 35. So I'm going to add an extra interval here. And if I put an interval below 0 to 5, what do you think that would be? It would just be what? If we're going in 5s, it would just be -5 to 0. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So to change a histogram into a frequency polygon, you first add 2 extra intervals, and we say it grounds the frequency polygon. Then what we do is we find the middle of each of these. So the middle of this would be here, the middle of this would be here, the middle of this would be here, 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 and here. So you go to the middle of the interval and you make a dot. Now, the last bit of a frequency polygon, a polygon is a shape that's closed with straight edges. And you simply draw a straight line with your ruler. Let me try that again. You draw a straight line with your ruler from one midpoint to the other, like that. And that is called a frequency polygon. A frequency polygon just basically finds the midpoint of each interval, and then it connects them with straight lines. Give me a thumbs up if you understand the basic transformation that you go through from a histogram to a frequency polygon. Give me a thumbs down if I've lost you. Okay, and now the thing is, because we need the midpoints, what we sometimes do is we add an extra column for the midpoint, and then we add an extra column for the coordinate of the items on the frequency polygon. And the way we do that is this. What is the midpoint between -5 and 0? It would just be -2.5. What's the midpoint between 0 and -5? It's 2.5. Between 5 and 10, 7.5. Between 10 and 15, 12.5. That's going to be 17.5, 22.5, 27.5. And then what is the last one going to be? It's going to be 32.5. Now, if you imagine what are the points on my frequency polygon, well, if you imagine this point over here, what is its coordinates going to be? Well, it's halfway between 0 and 5. So halfway between 0 and 5 would just have an x coordinate of 2.5, and its y coordinate is going to be whatever the frequency was. So that's 135. The one on the ground is just going to be, that's going to have a 0 frequency. Then the next point over here is halfway between 5 and 10. So that would be 7.5. And then the frequency count would be 81. So you can get the coordinates of the frequency polygon just by finding the middle of the interval and just using the frequency column. Give me a thumbs up if you understand how I filled in these 3 items. I just want to make sure you understand that the frequency polygon goes with the midpoints. Okay. Awesome, 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 awesome. If you're unsure, don't worry. We're going to do more practice after the break. All I was doing is for the x coordinate, I was finding the midpoint. And for the y coordinate, I was finding the frequency of that interval. But I can see I've lost a couple of students, so don't worry, we'll practice this more. Can we unmute Talefo?
Hi, sir.
Hey, how can I help?
To get the coordinates for y, do we just take the values for the frequency?
Yeah.
Oh,
For a frequency polygon, because frequency is the focus, we just use, so we're using this value.
okay.
There are other graphs which we'll learn about later, but for now, the frequency polygon focuses on the frequency. But the important bit of the x value is that it's in the middle of the group, or in the middle of the interval. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, now before we have a break, I want you guys to draw me a histogram using the information in this table. So a histogram will always have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. I will give you the fact that I'm going to start at 0. So I'm going to go 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100. And what do we have on the vertical axis for a histogram? What should we have on the vertical axis for a histogram? It's going to be frequency, yeah. So that's going to be frequency. In this case, the frequency is the number of learners. Over here, it's percentage. And the highest number is 11. So I'm going to go up in 2s, 2, 4. Actually, let me go up in 1s. It'll be easier. Okay, I want you to draw in the histogram, and when you are done, just type histogram in the chat box. Take a moment to draw the histogram and just see that you understand how the frequency table gets transformed into a graph. Okay, so my histogram looks like this. And now what I want you to do is, you don't have to do the table, but I want you to take your histogram and I want you to draw in a frequency polygon. So you've drawn your histogram. What are the 3 things that you need to do to change a histogram into a frequency polygon? I want someone to either put their hand up and tell me, or put it in the chat. How do I transform my lovely histogram into a frequency polygon? What's step 1? Sate, let's unmute Sate. What do you think we need to do first?
I think we need to find the midpoint of the percentages, and then we'll use them to plot the frequency polygon.
Perfect. Yep. The midpoints are the most important step. Is there anything else? So there's the midpoints. What else do I need? So I'm looking at the chat. Add 2 more intervals to ground it. Rafense has said we need 2 more intervals to ground it. Yep. So we've got the 2 intervals to ground it. We've got our midpoints. And there's one more thing we need to do to create a frequency polygon. Now, all we would need, assuming we've got the coordinates, now we can do an extra calculation, but in this case, the midpoint between 10 and 20 is 15. It's going to be quite easy to see what that is. Between 20 and 30, it's going to be 25. What's the final step to get my frequency polygon? I need to connect all these midpoints with straight lines. So a straight line between here and here. Straight line between here and here. Because it's a polygon, and polygons have straight lines. But the really important thing with the frequency polygon is that it literally has frequency on the y-axis, and we're at the midpoints of the intervals. And if necessary, we can plot the coordinates using more maths, but it just depends on the question. Satya, I see your hand is up again. Do you want to ask a question?
No, I'm good, sir.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. All right. So in the first half of today, we've looked at understanding what a histogram is, and we've also looked at what a frequency polygon is and how it's connected to a histogram. And so we've done well. It's time for a break. So I want you to turn on your cameras. I want you to stand up with me, and I want you to just have a little bit of unwinding time, because I know it's Monday. It's been a long day for all of us, and we need our bodies to work with us. So let's just start by stretching up and try to touch the sky. Oh, there we go. Feel a nice strain in the back of, stretch on the back of your shoulders. And let's swing our arms. So swing your arms from side to side. Just loosen them up. Pretend they're like licorice. And then let's do some small circles. And then big circles like you're doing the butterfly. I wish I could do butterfly, but it's just too hard for me to swim. And then change your direction. So big circles into small circles. And then let's just do some rotating. So gentle rotation to start with. And then as you relax more, you just start extending yourself. Okay, shake it out again. Let's do some tricep stretch. And while we're doing that, look away to the opposite side of the room with your eyes. Let them relax and unwind so that they focus somewhere far away. and then switch to the opposite tricep and look to the opposite corner of the room. So your eyes kind of have a break. Oh, okay. And then let us do some heart rate raising stuff and jumping jacks. It's really hard to beat the jumping jack for value for money on exercise. So let's do 15 of them. And we'll go in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Ooh, I'm always impressed by the amount of blood pumping around my body after a jumping jack. I feel like I can feel my body more closely. And then while we are all recovering from our jumping jacks, here is your challenge question for today. Whew, I am heart rate pumping. Let me know if you felt it as much as I did. I felt like I was doing quality jumping jacks, but whew, I can feel my heart rate. So 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. Sound German, don't I? Helicopter is 9. Yeah. Now, what else? Kabotso had the Jess jumping jacks. Okay, Kabotso, shout out. Some real acknowledgement there. I like to know who is the best person to get form tips from. The astronaut is 50, 50, 50. Now, what is the 50 plus 50 is 100. So what's the toolkit? And the toolkit is going to be 80. And now, so the final thing we have is 80 plus 9 plus 9, which would be 98. Futi agrees, Fazama agrees, Sonic agrees. So what that means is the first pieces of the space station launched in 1998. Wow. So the International Space Station is 25 years old this year. Is that correct? 3? Yeah. Look at that. Wow. I think the space station is older than everyone here except me. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it is the truth. Cool. I hope that you enjoyed that, everyone. And who knew the space station only launched in 1998? Okay. Let's go back to what we were doing. So before I move on from this example, I want to ask you, what is the modal interval for this histogram? What is the modal interval for this histogram? So the modal interval has to be 50 to 60 because it has the highest value. So we've got the modal interval. It is 50 to 60. What is the median interval? What is the median interval for this histogram? What do we need to do to figure out the median? We need to find the position first, and that needs to then help us. So what have we got? 25.5. Now, this is where before having a cumulative frequency column can come in quite handy. because it helps you figure out how far you get through the data set. So at this point, you've had 6 items up to 30, and then you've had 10. Now you have to get all the way up to 25. So 17, I better get moving. The next one is 28. Okay, I've got there. So what's the interval for the median? It's going to be 50 to 60 as well, because, oh, so it's the same in that case. Linda, we're going to do ogives after this. The difference between this and ogives is the ogives have the cumulative frequency on the vertical axis, whereas the frequency polygon and histogram have the frequency on the vertical axis. But yeah, they are connected to each other. Oh, how would you work out the interquartile range? Good question, Caitlin. So you couldn't do it in exactly the same way, but you could find the interval Q1, right? So when you normally find the position of Q1, you'd have a quarter times n plus 1. And so the position of that would be, what have you got, 50? So that would be 12.5 would be 50, so 12.75. So Q1 would be, the interval for the first quartile would be over here, between 40 and 50. But the problem is, you know that it's an interval, but you don't know what the exact number is. So you'd have to estimate the middle of that, I guess. If you really wanted a value, you'd probably say it's 45, because it's in the middle of that interval, which is the first quartile interval. But we generally don't do that with group data. We kind of stick to the 3 measures. Okay, I hope that helped, Caitlin, to your question. It was a good one. I liked your insight. Okay, so let's move on from that. I want you to draw me a histogram and frequency polygon for this data set. So draw me a histogram and a frequency polygon for this data set. I'll leave it to you. The one thing I will say is, in order to have the frequency polygon, just add an extra interval afterwards and add an extra interval before, just so you can ground your frequency polygon. So over to you guys. Actually, you know, I'm just going to start it. I'll even start at 0 just to make my life easier. Okay, so that's what's some big numbers here? So 10, 20, 30, 40. And this is time. And this would be frequency. write in the chat H for histogram when you finished with your histogram. I just want to get a feel for how things are going. So just type H when you're done with your histogram. And then once you're done with the histogram, move on to the frequency polygon. And, you know, it's not wrong to do extra working, but again, it's not difficult to see where the points are going to be because it's halfway into the interval and it's just going to be, and then, so draw the frequency polygon next. And then when you're done with the frequency polygon, just put F in the chat, so I know roughly how much time I need to provide for you guys. We get a different color. I'll use black. Yeah. I would use a ruler. I'm drawing this freehand because it's hard to use a ruler digitally, but let's make sure I have to ground it. So I have to go all the way down to that point over there. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you feel comfortable with frequency polygons and histograms. Give me a thumbs down if you feel unsure about this particular graph. And remember, this is a graph of a grouped data table that focuses on frequency. All right. Now, you guys have done really, really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little preview of the next, I'm going to leave that up, the next lesson. And a common topic in this grade 11 group data graph is, or the common thing is an ogive or cumulative frequency curve. So let's just read about that. An ogive or cumulative frequency curve is a graph that shows the information in a cumulative frequency table. The graph is useful for estimating the median and interquartile range of the grouped data. Always remember when drawing cumulative frequency curve from a table of grouped data, the cumulative frequencies are plotted on the upper limit of the interval. Now, the upper limit of the interval is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40. That's the upper limit. Now, the big difference with a cumulative frequency curve or an ogive is that instead of having the frequency on the vertical axis, you have the cumulative frequency. So you still have intervals that are going to be the same. You have group data intervals here, but here's cumulative. So just to make sure you guys know how to fill out a cumulative frequency column, I will give you the first two, but you have to tell me what A, B, C, and D are. So I went 4 plus 12 to get 16. I want to know what A is, and B, and C, and D. Linda, no, a standard deviation comes from a list of data, and so you couldn't do the standard deviation of grouped data because you would need to know the exact values. Okay, so A is indeed 44 because I added the 28. What about B, C, and D? So 44 plus 32 is 76. 76 plus 29, what's that going to be? So that's going to be 96 plus 9 is 105. And then what is this going to be? That is going to be 120. So what that means is in total, there were 120 learners. So this question is about learners. There were 120 learners in total in the data set. Okay, now, so you've got your intervals, you've got your frequency, and now because you're drawing an ogive, you've got this extra column. How do you know which points to put on your curve? And it's a curve, which means it's not going to be straight lines. You go to the end point. So you go to the end point of the interval. So on your 40, 50, 60. And now the question is, what is the Y value going to be? Well, the Y value comes from the cumulative frequency. So we're going to have and so these are going to be the points on my cumulative frequency curve. But we also need one point at the beginning to ground it. And so that point is going to be 0 in this case, because I've gone back 10 more units. And the cumulative frequency at the beginning will be 0 as well. Give me a thumbs up if you understand how I got these points. Give me a thumbs down if I've lost you on how I got the points. The big difference is in the ogive, you focus on cumulative frequency and you focus on the end of the interval. So the end of the interval as opposed to the middle. Now, if you want to draw this curve, what you need to do is you need a scale. So I go from 0 to 60. So let's see if I can do this. So 0, 10, 20. Maybe I could have spaced it out a bit better, but you get the idea. And I go all the way up to 120. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 10. So I'm going to use this scale to help me keep track of what I'm doing when I plot these points. So my very first point was the point 10, 4, which is going to be here, although actually my very first point is the grounding point, which is here. So I've done those two. Then I go to 2016. So 2016 will be about there. Then I go to 30, 44. So 30, and then 44 should be there. I go to 40, 76. 40, oh, so 40, 76, I'm really climbing up now. 50, 105, so 50, 105, and then 60, 120. And with a cumulative frequency curve, you actually have to have it curving. I should have gone through that point to get there. And you'll notice that it'll always get to the limit of how many items there were. So if there were 120 total, the highest value it can get to is 120. Now we're going to spend the next lesson talking about cumulative frequency curves and how to go backwards and forwards between them. But I thought it would be nice for me to just show you one. Why don't you do the interval 60 to 70? Okay, good question, Rafense. We do not need to ground, okay? We do not need to ground the ogive or the cumulative frequency curve. It ends, because remember the ogive focuses on the end points of the interval. And so it ends when it gets to 60, 120, that's the last point. I don't need to come back again. That is a thing for the frequency polygon, which looks more like that. Okay. But remember, this was dealing with frequency here, whereas this one is dealing with the cumulative frequency. Okay. I think we've done quite a lot today.